what were our options from there? Did we think that like if there was a tool that could do 1/4 of your entire workload, do we think businesses weren't going to use it? No, the businesses are definitely going to buy something that takes 1/4 of the work away. I think that's pretty
already
obvious.
See the email that you're going to write.
100%, right? Exactly. Do you want me to take away 1/4 of your work? You know, like so then it was a case of, will that 1/4 get bigger or smaller? Well, if we know anything about the history of technology, it gets better, faster, cheaper, right? So we knew that 25% was only going to go up. And then we also realized, hey, look, if somebody is actually, like if we have 100 people on a support team and all of a sudden 25% or more of the work disappears, what happens? The seats are going to get cancelled, and we sell seats.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Venture Podcast with me, Colleen Fabry. Our guest today is Traynor, co-founder and chief strategy officer of Intercom, one of the most iconic SaaS companies to come out of Europe. If you've ever messaged a company through a chat that actually worked, chances are you've used Intercom. Des co-founded Intercom in 2011 in Dublin, and since then, the company has helped redefine how businesses talk to customers. Today, he leads Intercom's R&D team based in Dublin and London, but he's led many teams within the company, including product, marketing, customer support, and content. Des is also a prolific investor in companies like Stripe, Miro, Notion, and Hopin. In this conversation, we dive into the moment when they realized the impact of AI on their business, the decision to build a new AI product, even in the face of product cannibalization, and the importance of honest communication to the organization in the face of high productivity gains, automations, and potential job displacement. Enjoy.
Take two.
Alrighty, take two. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Alrighty, so you were telling me that you're based in Dublin at the moment. I saw that you guys have offices a little bit all over the place, like San Francisco, maybe also London, and other countries. How do you guys have the team distributed? How does it work?
So all of our product is built in Dublin and London. We started as 4 Irish people. We moved to San Francisco at the very, very, very start. Our CEO, Owen, went over there to raise money. That was 2011. We built our product team out in Dublin initially, and then later on in London. But we were 5 offices. We're like Dublin, London, Chicago for sales and support, San Francisco for like G&A, finance, marketing, sales, etc. And then also we were in Sydney again for sales and support. With sales and support, you kind of have to follow the time zone.
And was it? Did you guys have to think long and hard? Did you guys have a playbook how to structure the team? Was it, let's say, clear from the beginning that you just want to have the engineering team in one place? I know that a lot of companies that try to, or they just raise, let's say, Series A or Series B. They want to open new offices. They always kind of hit this problem. How should we split the team? And should we split the engineering team? Should we keep the engineering team in one place and then all these other offices just to focus, let's say, marketing and sales?
I think we were probably all in one place for the first, I would guess, 3 or 4 years. And then we actually built out a small team in San Francisco who were working primarily on growth, working alongside our marketing team. And then it was really when we kind of felt that we had tapped out the sort of talent scene in Dublin that we were like, right, we need to like look further afield. London was the most obvious place to go. I think we held an event in London and we had like 1,000 people show up, a load of whom were asking, could we work at Intercom? And then we realized, well, maybe we should just open an office over here. I think today when we hire all across Europe, we ask people, you know, which city do you want to move to, Dublin or London? And it seems to be a relatively even split where people choose to go.
Got it. And I was actually just before this episode, I was editing the episode with Anton Osaka from Lovable. Yeah. I don't know if you know the tool or if you know the guys.
We know the product. They're actually a huge Finn customer, so we're big fans of Lovable.
And like, do you think can someone build a competitor of Intercom on Lovable? Like with the cost of building software going close to zero, like how do you think one can build a competitive advantage, a moat?
So it's 2 different questions there. Could you build a competitor to Intercom? If you take Intercom, the help desk product, and could you build it with Lovable? I don't think yet, but I think in the future that will definitely be possible. I do think the terminal cost of code as it relates to B2B SaaS will continue to decline and get lower and lower, and you will enter this era of hyper competition. I often think it's not therefore true to say that there'll be no B2B SaaS apps because everyone can build their own. Like open source didn't kill Microsoft Word. You know, there are like reasons why people prefer to trust companies with, you know, and generally speaking, your average company doesn't want to run its own help desk, run its own email server, run its own project management app. People like to outsource these problems to other people versus having a large IT team who maintains a load of bespoke prompt engineered software. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. But I think, yeah, like the cost of like, if you and me started the startup in, let's just say 2 years time, using Lovable and Claude Code and all of the latest tools, could we accelerate to a position where we had 80-90% of Intercom's core help desk functionality? I think that's a reasonable proposition. The last 10% is really hard, it always is, because inevitably you bump into things like scale, race conditions, all this sort of stuff that you're just not going to prompt your way out of. More generally though, like our primary product is Fin. And Fin is an extremely deep piece of AI. It's you know, multiple different, extremely hyper optimized subsystems working with each other to do the job of replicating a customer service agent. And I don't think you could prompt your way to anything approximating that. The main reason is you need a lot of control over the core architecture, and you need to be able to like work in an extremely scientific manner to actually deliver a continuously improving AI agent that gets better and better at doing its job. And I think that's like, you'd be kind of pushing the limits of what prompting can do. So I think it's unlikely that you'd be able to replicate Fin. And just to make this not like self-promotional, I think similarly, I don't think you could use Claude Code to build a very credible competitor to Claude Code or Cursor or Windsurf. I think there's a lot more work beyond that.
Absolutely. And I would love to learn more about how did you guys, let's say, how did you use this wake-up call when you saw the AI wave and you as a company with a certain type of cost structure, you realized that maybe you can use AI to automate a lot of the workflows and be a little bit more efficient? Before we kind of go to the refounding moment of Intercom, I would like us to take maybe a step back and talk about, you know, the birth of Intercom. Like, what was the original insight that sparked Intercom?
So we were running a consultancy building software for other people, and we had a side project called Exceptional, which was actually a Ruby on Rails exception handling SaaS app. And one of the hardest things to do with Exceptional was actually, you know, talk to our customers. You know, we at the time thought maybe this was like a unique thing because we were based in Dublin, and if only we were on the street in San Francisco, we could see all of our users. But very quickly we realized it was actually a common problem. When people went to conferences, they wanted to talk to their customers, they held meetups, etc. Basically connecting businesses and their customers in 2011 was actually quite difficult. So we built some software that was like literally let you push messages to your customers inside the product and let your customers talk back to you. And I think Owen, who's our CEO, said to Kieran, who's our CTO, or was our CTO at the time, at one point, like, wouldn't it be funny if this turned out to be a bigger proposition than the entire Exceptional product that we had built it inside of? Very quickly, that turned out to be the case. And basically, the insight, the core idea was running internet software is hard and talking to your customers is important. So somebody should make software that makes it really easy to talk to your customers. Now, it sounds kind of trivial almost to describe it like that now, but you have to bear in mind in 2011, the tool stack just wasn't there to run a sort of internet business. Like Mixpanel didn't exist, Stripe didn't exist. We were still charging people using PayPal and stuff like that. Like the entire landscape of B2B SaaS tooling just was very, very different back then. So we emerged as a kind of if you're running an internet business, install Intercom. You'll see who your users are, what they're doing, and you can talk to them. And even today, sitting here in like July 2025, that's still a compelling value proposition, and I don't really think we've any credible competitor for that use case. We have people who've copied bits and pieces of it, but again, much like the earlier point about like could Lovable clone Intercom, like some of this stuff's actually quite hard, and it's hard to do, or at least hard to do it well, easy to do it badly. Yeah.
And what's in your opinion, what's the hard part about it. And as you mentioned, like probably in a lot of things, it's very easy maybe to do up to 90%, but the last 10% is the hard part, and you just have to do it well.
I think what we see, Intercom has no shortage of like pixel perfect copycat rip-off companies who think they can sell a version of Intercom for $9. And the thing they always struggle with is like just general kind of core reliability. And what that means is they think they're going to get all these big customers to switch from an Intercom type product to them. The big customer installs it, and it turns out when a business is having 2,000 parallel conversations with its customers, you bump into all sorts of crazy scaling challenges. And then especially if you're one platform hosting thousands of customers, hosting thousands of parallel conversations, you bump into all of the hard part of engineering, whether it's race conditions or whether it's just scale or performance or potentially security, depending as well. So like running instant live chats between like agents and people is hard. Sending one in-app message out to like 100,000 users at the same time and letting them all reply is hard. Running a sort of customer data platform such that every time somebody logs into your product and moves around, Intercom is live updated with all their most recent activities is hard. None of these things are impossible. I'm sure some of our listeners are scratching their head going, where's the complexity in this? It's really easy. Like, I would just say it is really easy, but then just like crank the numbers up, you know? When you're having like 500 million conversations a month, that's real. That's like complex. When you're indexing the behaviors of billions of people on the internet, that's hard. And like, fine, you say, well, maybe we'll never have to solve that problem. Okay, that's fine too. But now you're a substantially smaller proposition on Intercom, which again is fine. And as a result, the ones who have been successful at copying Intercom have kind of stayed in their box of being like, we're like for small e-commerce stores, we're an Intercom or whatever, that type of thing.
And do you remember, how did you get your first 100 customers? If I remember correctly, you guys were a consultancy. You had the product on the side, probably you were selling the piece of software on the side. You realized that maybe this is a problem that is across internet companies, across the world. When was the moment that you guys decided to go all in on the piece of software, change the name, maybe raise VC?
My memory of it is at LessConf, which was a conference that me and Owen spoke at. And I think it might have been 2011 or 2010. I might get the year wrong, but Owen said he just thinks we should wind down the consultancy and go all in on Intercom. And at the time I was like, whoa, because we had other products too at the same time. But genuinely, it was absolutely, of course, the right decision. And so that was the decision to go all in. And then your question about how did we get our customers? What I did, which I think, like, you know, we probably knew our first 5 or 10 customers personally and said, hey, will you please install Intercom? And they did. After that, I basically was trying to get as many customers as we could. So I was mailing kind of every person or every citizen of the internet that I had any contact with whatsoever. And I'd mail them. It wasn't just a please use Intercom. It was like, hi, I'm Des. You don't know me. Here's things we've done before. We're working on this thing called Intercom. Here's what it intends to do. Here's what it would look like if you installed it in your product. Here's the things it could do for you. Here's a screenshot of how it would behave if we let you send messages to your customers. Here's what those messages would look like. And I do all of this kind of bespoke. So it was kind of an expensive email to send. It was like 5 or 10 minutes per person, and I'd probably do like 20 or 30 of them a day. Even today, if I go back to the first page of my sent in Gmail, all you're going to see is just a never-ending stream of from me to some rando saying, subject, Intercom, a CRM and messaging tool for web products, or whatever we were calling ourselves. And that was what we did initially, and then we scaled it by doing webinars. So we'd say, hey, because we were getting like a lot more interest, and we had to like explain to people how Intercom worked and how you should use it and what it could do for you. I used to run these Wednesday webinars at 6 p.m. Where we'd basically just teach. Like I would log on and just give a quick, maybe 25 slide presentation of what Intercom was, and then just take questions and answer them. And like Owen would be on or Kieran would be on. We'd just be listening for like, what are people asking? Oh, people want live data. Oh, that's interesting. You just keep kind of like learning from that. But it was just like, I think whenever people ask me a question, how did you get your first users? There's always a question behind the question, which is, do you know any sort of secret hack or cheat or way that I can do this without working hard? And the answer is basically no. Like it's a grind. And I think the way you find out if you have product market fit is you mail 1,000 people and you find out if even 100 of them are interested. Do they even open your email? And I think like what we had that a lot of people don't have or struggle to find is we had found something, a problem, a pain point that every product owner had, which was they wanted to talk to their customers, let their customers talk to them, and wanted to do it in the context of their product or app. And we did it, and that was what we had. And that's like ultimately what got the replies, which is what got the customers, which is what, you know, kind of just got, and Intercom itself has a little bit of virality to it because you've seen it on the internet, you know what it looks like. And everyone sees it and everyone interacts with it and goes, shit, this thing's cool, I should use this. So that, like, you know, once you start the engine going, it gets pretty good pretty quickly. But yeah, that was the ignition motor was just actual grind of like, you know, like basically writing code and talking to users, as YC would say.
Right. So if you kind of take a step back, if the value proposition doesn't resonate through the email, then probably you're not solving a problem, or you don't know how to communicate that you understand the problem of your potential users.
Yeah, maybe you're writing to the wrong people or whatever. Like there's like to me, like there's like an anatomy to product market fit. It's like, who is the market? What is the market's pain points, problems that they have? What are their needs? And then what does your product do? Does it actually solve those needs? And then does it solve it with a user experience that they want? So you can solve needs for people by like enterprise services and forward deployed engineers, or you can solve it with simple UI. And depending, like, you know, large companies often just want you to do it for them. Tiny startups don't want to have anyone involved. They want to have the user interface they can play with themselves. Like, so there's a, you know, product market fit is an easy phrase people say a lot, but I think when you break it down, it's actually, there's a lot of complicated questions. Who's the market? What type of customers? What size? You know, what's their, like, you know, what are their defining characteristics? Who is the buyer? Is it the CEO, the head of tech, the head of product, whatever? And then what is the actual pain point you solve? And then and is that pain point real? Like, do they actually care? Would they spend money to solve it? Do they currently spend time to solve it? Is there any evidence that suggests they really want to solve this problem? And then how do you solve that problem? Is it a real solution? Is it a superficial solution? Does it actually get to the core of the problem in a really good way? Is it easy to use? Is it easy to get? You have to, you know, and like, it's hard to, obviously I'm putting a lot of weight on one email here, but like, if I mailed you saying like, hey, Kaelin, I've got a solution for you that basically takes every podcast you've ever written and splices together all of the best bits in really precise video clips that are really easy to tweet, share, post on TikTok. We automate the subtitles. We splice in screenshots of the founders' products along the way. We create these summaries. At some point, you're like, shit, that is a thing I do a lot of. And I've got you know what I mean? You're going to click reply, or you're going to click my link. Whereas if I said, hey, we summarize podcasts, you just give us a video link and we render you back to text. You're like, yawn, bored, and you're archiving that email. Like, there's just a tension there, like, of like, do you actually have a real deep solution to a real deep problem?
I like that. And was that like one decision in the early years that changed everything later on for Intercom?
I think the decision to go to San Francisco to incorporate and to raise money, Owen went over there on, like, you know, pretty much incorporation day or whatever. I think that was probably the single biggest pivotal decision. I've seen the counterfactual. I've seen Irish startups or like European startups who tried to, like, you know, kind of grind it out in their local town, and you bump into walls left, right, and center. It might be slightly different in 2025. I don't think it's that different. I think to be a relevant tech player, like, bankers go to Wall Street, actors go to Hollywood, tech companies go to San Francisco.
Interesting. So on a level of, let's say, on a spectrum, how much do you think has changed? Just like 10, 15% better? Whereas like you think it's still 80% much more worth to go to San Francisco?
I think the scene in Europe is many, many, many times improved. I'd say it's perhaps 10x better in Europe than it was in 2011. By that I mean the funding environment in Europe is a lot better. You can raise money at like much closer to San Francisco valuations than you could in 2011. I think there's a lot more maturity around the ecosystem, such that, like, the age-old story of finding a great European product with a busted up cap table because the uncle's sister's neighbor owns 60% because they put $2,000 in 5 years ago. Like that story is less and less common. So I think from a financing point of view, it's definitely better. I think from a talent, and then just from a like proven path point of view, I think like companies, like, obviously, you know, we did ultimately do the San Francisco incorporation, but we're still heavily based in Europe. but more so like say Synthesia or a UK company, Granola or a UK company, Lovable or a European company. Like Paris is alive with like the next generation of AI startups. Like that. I think we are growing a lot more like examples of like you can actually build a great company in Europe. I think that wasn't true in 2011 at all. So I think in that regard, it's way better. Is it still advantageous to go to San Francisco? Possibly. I don't know, because I don't like, I'm not as involved in the early stage, and I don't want to kind of presuppose any knowledge here. I know that like all of the happenstance, all of the serendipity, all of the luck that you might want is probably found knocking around the streets of San Francisco, meetup to meetup, person to person, investor to an investor. And I think, but I think the gap is closing, but I think San Francisco still has an advantage.
I also know, if we can tie up your angel investments, I also know that you made like more than 100 angel investments. Do you invest across Europe and the US? And what is maybe a difference that you see in the founders? Do you see that you favor much more the US San Francisco style than the European style? Do you see some differences there?
It's hard. I don't actually index that way. Like, because when I think about the companies, I don't think like, was Synthesia European or American or whatever. I would say in general, if I invest in an early stage European startup, they tend to be a lot more, in a good and bad way, like needy and hungry for advice. Versus in general, if I invest in a San Francisco early stage startup, they'll make a hire within the first 5 hires that has been in 3 startups before and can kind of light a path for them to, go in a certain direction or whatever. Whereas there are questions you get from European startups ranging like from just, it's out of like a positive naivety or whatever, but like how much should we pay our team? Whereas these sort of things are kind of like much more codified into the sort of ecosystem of San Francisco, if you like. And like this, so there's just a bit more naivety. It goes away early, but I think that's one challenge. And then I just think ambition and aggression is just more natural, I think, in American founders than it is in European founders. I think it takes, it's like a beast you need to feed in Europe. You kind of like, hey, like I've literally talked to founders who like, say, back when these numbers were impressive, right, before AI, like they'd be like, hey, we just did 1 to 4 and we think we can do 4 to 8 next year. And I'd be like, whoa, that's like pretty pessimistic. And they're like, what? Like that'd be having the same year again. Like this was just an amazing year. We want to have another amazing year. And I'm like, but it's not as amazing. Like you're already doubling. You've just quadrupled. That's not impressive. And they're like, well, I have no idea how to quadruple again. And I'm like, right, but like let's talk about that. Whereas I think there can be a little bit of a complacency, but I will say like a lot of this depends on who they've raised the money from. If they've raised the money from, I hate naming names in Europe, but like if they've raised it from like Blossom or from Point Nine or companies or like VCs like that, First Minute, etc., they tend to orient them straight away and say like, yo, you need to think about yourself like a Silicon Valley hot fast moving startup who's going to be globally relevant and dominant and who's going to like, impact the world. And, doubling your revenue at a tiny size ain't going to cut it. So let's get big and ambitious. Whereas I think sometimes companies can be like quite successful in a corner for too long and have kind of modulated or like tempered their ambition because of that. And they're the ones where you find you need to like really find an ignition switch.
Absolutely. You're just so right. And if we go back to our initial refounding moment for Intercom, like at what moment did you realize that the AI wave is inevitable? Because AI has been around for decades, right? We always had machine learning and deep learning and neural networks and convolutional neural networks. Everyone was kind of playing around. And then we had the LLMs, GPUs got more cheap, and now we have at the application layer. Do you remember the moment when you were at Intercom and were like, shit, we just have to, like at a company wide, we have to see what's up with this?
Yeah, I mean, the trigger was like November 30th, 2022, like when, the link chat.openai.com got passed around, and Fergal, who's our head of AI, pinged me over Slack and said, you need to look at this. We had been playing with OpenAI's playground models, which were like the kind of precursor here, which were pretty impressive, but like still not obviously weaponizable. But once I played it, I mean, I think for me, the question I asked ChatGPT in my first couple of hours of playing with it was first of all, how do I delete the cookies in my browser? And it gave me like an enumerated answer to that question immediately. And then I said, how do you install Intercom in a mobile app? And it gave me that answer immediately. And then I think I said something slightly more contexty, like maybe, how do you install Intercom in a mobile app if, and I gave some extra conditions. And the extra conditions were me testing, could it read more than one article and regurgitate new information from combining two? I think I might have said, like, to make sure that for a sports team, you're tracking all the players. And it suggested the various bits of custom information that it would install too. So immediately I was like, shit, it was very clear to me that this thing could do customer support. And then the following morning I met with Fergal and he gave me his take, which was far deeper and more gnarly in evaluation. And basically the day after ChatGPT, everyone started learning the word hallucination, which is this idea of an ungrounded inference made within a model. But so the question was like, can we guardrail against hallucinations? We didn't. It wasn't obvious that you could do it immediately, like as in on the day after ChatGPT launched. It wasn't clear you could protect GPT 3.5 against ungrounded inferences. So we, based on that, I spoke with Owen, our CEO, that evening, and I was like, have you played with this? This thing's really big. We spoke all the way through the weekend, and then on the Monday, we basically got to work building our first AI features. Our first release was targeted inside our inbox, so it was human in the loop type stuff. We weren't like letting it run free. That was because we didn't have a great answer to the hallucination question. We're like, hey, this thing might be wrong on occasion. And that sounds naive now, but like you have to bear in mind, November 2022, people were like very, very unfamiliar with this. I think 12 weeks later, we released Finn, which is the AI agent based on GPT-4, which is the next model, one that was far more guardrailable, if you know what I mean. You could insulate that against all the ungrounded inferences in a really reliable way. And that once we had that, we realized, right, this thing can do customer service. And then it just became a case of like, well, what are the realities that are going to unfold here? When we launched Finn could do 25% of your customer support volume, right? 25%. So what were our options from there? Did we think that like, if there was a tool that could do 1/4 of your entire workload, do we think businesses weren't going to use it? No, the businesses are definitely going to buy something that takes 1/4 of their work away. I think that's pretty
already see
obvious.
the email that you're going to write.
100%, right? Exactly. Do you want me to take away 1/4 of your work? You know, like, so then it was a case of, will that quarter get bigger or smaller? Well, if we know anything about the history of technology, it gets better, faster, cheaper, right? So we knew that 25% was only going to go up. And then we also realized, hey, look, if somebody is actually, like if we have 100 people on a support team and all of a sudden 25% or more of the work disappears, what happens? The seats are going to get cancelled. And we sell seats. But prior to Finn, we sold seats in a help desk product. So then you just look at the calculus of like, right, we're selling in our product, Finn, that is directly hostile, will cannibalize the previous product, Intercom, right? Intercom's help desk specifically. And then, so what do you have to get right? Well, we need to make sure that if like your company installs Finn and we are now doing all of that work for you, you're going to buy less seats. How do we make sure that that is not damaging to us? Well, we charge for the amount of resolutions we do. How much do we charge? Well, we worked that out and we settled on a price of $1. I think we launched slightly higher and we came down to $1. And like, so then it was just a case of like making that story happen everywhere. And like today, Finn has maybe 6,000 customers, revenue in the tens of millions, going to probably quadruple this year. It's a very, very, very fast growing product. It's like, you know, I've seen nothing like it before. I've never worked on anything like this, but I think like a lot of this comes back to just, you know, being able to extrapolate from the initial, you know, moment that we had of playing with ChatGPT. And then ultimately, and I can't really I can't overstate this enough. Like having an extremely decisive CEO is really important at times like this. I think the most natural thing to do genuinely is to like make a diet decision. Like what's the smallest thing? Hey, let's put 2 people on this in a corner and we'll play some lip service, or like, sure, let's build a little AI feature and we'll put some sparkly buttons in the corner or whatever. Like that's what I would call like a light decision, a diluted decision, like basically like how do we optically look like we're doing something, but really just business as usual. There are still companies operating like that today. But what we had was a decisive CEO was like, I hear you, makes sense, let's go. And that's what I've kind of done.
Wonderful. it kind of seems that the companies that are mature nowadays, and also I talk with a friend from private equity, and there are the companies that are mature enough, they realize that the product development is going to change, that AI is going to change a lot of workflows. But then they have like two essential problems. One, if you, let's say, acknowledge that you need to make a change, you need to somehow reassess the org chart, reassess what you need and what you don't. And then the second is what you said with cannibalizing your product, because then you kind of realize that, hey, this is going to eat from the other products. So what is a strategy in which, maybe to your point, and how you guys actually price per outcome, but at the same time, our price per seat goes down. So seeing that actually you guys had, like you were very decisive, both in having the courage to kind of cannibalize and also maybe finding a way to price it based on outcome. But then how do you look at the org chart now? How do you communicate to the Intercom team? How does that, the automation of workflows, do you see that then you can put the same amount of, let's say, manpower towards the other workflow on pay per outcome?
I think you have to start in terms of communication with just really proper authenticity. I think our whole industry went through a period where I think people were just too afraid to speak reality to their team and tell them what was going on, or tell them about the true nature of what happens in a company or whatever. The first thing you have to realize is, like, it's really unlikely, if you're in a software company, it's really unlikely that AI hasn't massively impacted your kind of landscape and what you should build and what you should sell. And because of that, everything has to be on the table. New products, closing down products, killing product lines, layoffs, expansions, fundraising, down rounds, everything has to be on the table. And I think if you're afraid to say that to your team, maybe not to say that, but like if you're afraid to give your team a new direction because of what will they think, you're kind of screwed. You have to be, thankfully, like one of our values that Owen brought in was like, was just basically like resilience, the idea of taking painful change and moving forward. And I think you have to be able to make these hostile changes that will hurt the company in the short term for the long-term survival. The way to think about it is, do you want to build the company that kills your current company? Or do you want to have a long, slow march into irrelevance, eventually to be killed by somebody else's company who did the thing you should have done? And when you realize that choice, it's not really a choice when you play it out properly. It's basically, do you want your company to succeed or not? And if the answer is yes, then downstream of yes might be kill the old product, or take 80% of the resourcing off it and put it onto the new product, and sell the new product at a cheaper price than the old product. And, change your brand, change everything about your company, who you sell to, what you charge, how you build software, the product you build, how you market, how you advertise, who your competitive set is. Like, whole terabytes of Google Drive docs are irrelevant, right? Because of this. Like, literally everything that you thought was true on November 29th, 2022, and we're late talking about this, but like everything you thought was true once upon a time is gone, absolutely irrelevant. It's full stack reformation. Ultimately, the question you're really trying to answer is, if I was to start a company today to tackle the problem that I was initially going for in my sort of original product market fit dilemma, what would that company look like? And how do I look as much like that company as possible while still accepting that, yes, we have to run a business, we have revenue, we have customers, we have employees. You obviously need to keep the existing engine running so that you can, use that fuel to, or use that like trajectory, if you like, to start the new engine. But but I think you have to have the freedom to like not be afraid of the gravity of the change, and speak openly about that, and then truly make sure that, like, org by org, function by function, that you're actually making it happen. So like our CTO Dara sent out a mail recently titled 2X, where he said something like, we intend to like double the productivity of our engineering org just by using AI. And a lot of people would be like, why do we have to do that? And the answer is because that's what a modern software company that was started 6 weeks ago would do. They would use all the right tools in all the right ways. They'd have a very clean AI native code base, and it would be very, very easy to work for AI to work on it. They'd be using Claude and Lovable or all sorts of things like that. And they'd be incredibly fast and incredibly competitive. And we either become that company or become killed by that company. And I'd rather become that company. And it just, there's so many changes like this that you just have to make consistently in order to make sure that you're not burdened by being an incumbent. And for what it's worth, like the market will only wait so long before it corrects you. So you're better off correcting yourself.
Absolutely. And in which stage of the transformation are you? So you've been fairly early on to observe the change. You said, okay, we have to be decisive and we have to build a new AI native product and we have to take Intercom through this transformation. Where in the stage do you think you are?
I'd say we're probably still in the first maybe 10 or 20%.
Wow.
Why do I say that? Well, like our vision for Fin isn't yet finished. We're still building Fin actively. And Fin is a more ambitious product than a help desk. So we have a lot more software to build in that regard. I think, our help desk product is pretty mature, but still needs more features, and we'll continue to flesh that out for our larger customers who use Fin and our help desk as a kind of complete solution. So we'll be continuing to work on that. But I think I would say, when we set out on this journey, we launched what we call this Believe page. It was like at intercom.com/believe, where we outlined our belief of what the future of customer service will be. And I'd say we're maybe we've definitely been proven correct. Like as in, I think it's not it was pretty prescient or whatever. But I think genuinely we have so much more to go to realize what Fin should become, which is this idea of a customer agent that can handle all sorts of things. I won't get into it too much, but that's a lot of what we're working on right now. We've so much more software to build, genuinely. That I would describe, I'd be hesitant to describe us as much more than 10 or 15% done maybe. And then in terms of actual company transition, I think we're largely there, but we're still we set ourselves 12 months, say, to double productivity in engineering. I think we're 2 months into that, but I think at the end of that, hopefully we'll have achieved this 200% improvement in throughput. 100% improvement. But then we'll probably set a new goal, which will be all right, now that we've gone out of there, how do we get to an AI native code base, or how do we start but I don't know, everything's on the table always. Should we rebuild our inbox to be assuming that Fin is in every conversation? If so, it would be a very different product. And maybe that's what you'd build if you're starting a new company today. So I think I think anyone who expresses any certainty in this world is almost always lying to themselves. I think, we genuinely approach this whole thing as believing that we understand the trajectory that things are on, but you have to kind of be humble enough such that when when Grok 4 launches, we have to be well, maybe there's something here that we need to change. Maybe the reasoning model is a new thing, whatever. You kind of always have to be looking for what's changing and how does that change our assumptions about the future of the world. And there's very few things you can have hard coded, There's very few things you can say, no matter what, we'll always do blah. Because honestly, this whole landscape is just constantly shifting. MCP didn't exist, 15 months ago. Now it's a huge part of Intercom. The market won't wait. You're going to have to make sure that it's there, that you're able to react to these things. So I think even road mapping, we're hesitant to roadmap much more than 6 months at a time. Because, our customers would love to hear the Vision 2027 version of our roadmap. We're dude, we don't even know Vision 2025. Who knows what's coming in December? We don't. Yep. And let's not pretend we do.
So if I understand correctly, the revenue coming from, let's say, AI native features, products is less than 10%. You're maybe 10, 20% within the transformation of the whole company, with the focus to increase 2x productivity across the whole company. When do you think you'll be at 50%? And when do you think, and I don't know if that's a correlation there, if when with the whole company you are at 50%, also the revenue is mainly coming from the AI product and not the SaaS product?
Cool. So when I was answering the question about percentages, really what I was answering is the journey through the transition. I wasn't really commenting on revenue specifically. If your question is when do we think that all of our revenue will be AI focused, I think it'll be I don't know if that will ever happen, because I think we're still going to sell a help desk product that people will use to provide human to human customer service. And I think that makes sense, and we'll continue to build and sell that product too. It's especially the case that a lot of our larger customers, love the idea of like Finn that does the majority of your customer service, and then Finn really nicely hands over to a human whenever it gets to a point where like, hey, human approval is needed or whatever. So I suspect that I suspect it won't ever go 100-0. But I if I had to guess, I'd say it could be like 80-20 in a matter of years in terms of AI to non-AI revenue. I think that like that's quite likely, or like something of that order of magnitude is quite likely. But I think that's probably true in every single category for us. Where I think we're more obviously in the target zone just because of the category that we operate in. But I would be surprised if take like Figma's AI product revenue doesn't outpace their boxes and arrows revenue in a short matter of time. And I think that'll just be true in everything from coding agents, GitHub. I suspect we'll see more revenue out of Copilot than they do out of GitHub seats. You name it. I think we're moving towards selling work. Work is what people want to buy, and work is more valuable than seats to do work. So I think you'll just see this transition, and it won't be slow. Like once people realize, hey, Fin can do today, if a new customer installs Fin, within a month it's doing 61 or 62% of your total support volume. They're very quick to turn that on, and once they realize this, they're not sitting there like, "Ooh, what should we do next?" It's very obvious what they should do next. Turn Fin on and start this sort of process.
Absolutely. And if we change gears and get personal, I know that we're going a little bit over time. I don't know if you have 10 minutes.
That's okay. Yeah, go for it.
What advice would you give a founder starting a B2B SaaS product today?
I would kind of glibly say, don't. But I think. That's more of a joke response than it is a real one. I think the advice I'd actually say is what domain are you in? What problem are you solving? Those problems, this whole idea of jobs to be done, really understand exactly what it is you're trying to do. It still really matters. The next piece is really it's work out what bits of your product can't be assume AI is going to do everything. And then find the bits where you are certain that AI can't do it. And that's kind of where your B2B SaaS aspect comes in, right? That's where you're going to have to go build dashboards or approval mechanisms or human in the loop or Copilot or whatever it is you want to build. But I think the mistake is people often think, people underestimate AI. They underestimate the trajectory of AI, and they overestimate the value of their current skills, which is probably going to be, B2B SaaS, drop downs, dashboards, windows, icons, menus, pointers, all the old school stuff that they would have built their entire career on. I think people genuinely overestimate the value of that in the future. So I get excited when I hear about startups that say, hey, we're going to take on invoicing, but we're going to do it entirely through an AI agent. And we're going to have nothing to log into. The whole thing takes place over WhatsApp. The whole thing takes place over Slack or Signal or something like that. I'm like, okay, you're thinking in the future. I like that. And I get dismayed when I think someone says, hey, I'm going to take on project management, but we're going to have a cute little AI feature in the corner. Because I'm like, you don't. No, I don't believe that that's actually going to be relevant. So what advice would I give to a B2B SaaS founder? The abstract thing that would have been true in 2011 is deeply understand your product space. But I think just as much it's important to understand what AI can and can't do, and make sure you're building a product that I often say the phrase, don't build a MiniDisc. I don't know, do you remember the Sony MiniDisc?
Yeah.
It was, so before the iPod, there was, I'll say this for the benefit of your younger viewers.
Thank you.
Before the iPod, there was a product called the MiniDisc. Sony had it, it was really cool. It existed for about 9 years, from 95 to maybe from 99 maybe to 2010 or something like that was the last one made. For that period of time, it was hot shit. It was brilliant. It was ultimately the best solution, but it was a product that was inherently transitionary. The thing that the MiniDisc was assuming was that solid state hard drives would basically never get good enough or whatever, right? And they did. And then they were left without a product at all. And I think that's the risk for a lot of these AI startups we see today, is that they're building MiniDiscs. They're building something that was wildly important and successful for a brief 6 or 7 years, but then ultimately disappeared to irrelevance. And I think the way you try to avoid that is you work out what are the core assumptions I'm making in my product and in my business that I think will be true for a long time? And am I open-minded enough and am I observing enough to be sure that if I'm wrong, I'll know first and I'll be able to react and adapt. And so that's the best thing I can say is like, you're kind of you're playing a game of Minesweeper or whatever, like trying to build a B2B SaaS product right now. There will be some rewards, but there's going to be a lot of things that look good and then die.
And what's something you used to care about that no longer matters for you personally?
Probably Twitter. I think I used to see Twitter as like an extension of my own community and the tech community at large. And I think it actually used to be that, honestly. And I think over the last 5, maybe 7 years, it's just kind of gone like the algorithmic nature of it has just like broken aspects of that because I get exposed to too much garbage that I don't care about. And then the link sharing aspect of it is gone, and that you can't share links on Twitter without getting punished anymore. And I think those two things together means that like I used to see interesting articles from people who I was interested in, and now I see garbage videos from people I don't know. At best it might be like a new product launch. Middle of the road might be like, maybe it's, I don't know, Dua Lipa or something like that. But most of the time it's like look at this car crash of 2 people, from this security footage or whatever. And I know I'm supposed to like mute and delete and block every single one of these, but I just feel like that was a network that once mattered to me that I really I don't know how to engage with it all in any sort of emotionally resonant way anymore.
Yeah, it kind of seems that all the social networks go from one to few or few to few, where the network that you are surrounded kind of matter, to one to many, where it's like everything is just the algorithm gives a lot of credit, a lot of weight to what's viral, regardless if that's interesting for you. Do you still use like any type of social apps like LinkedIn or, I don't know, Instagram? With LinkedIn, it happened the same, right? But
yeah. I mean, you're totally correct. I mean, like, look, the sort of the pitch goes like this, and this is true whether you're Twitter, LinkedIn, or even like Spotify or like Substack for that matter. It goes something like this. It's like, hey, you should engage here. Like if it's a band on Spotify, you should put your music here, or like you should put your podcast here or whatever, or you should post your tweets here. And you say, okay, you start doing it. And for a couple of years, it's great because like all your fans are seeing your shit, or like all your followers are like seeing your posts, whatever. And then at some stage, they bring in advertising, and then in order to permit advertising, no one's going to choose to see ads. So they have to have a feed concept. So they bring in a feed concept, and then they randomly splice in bits of ads. And then the algorithm ultimately rewards time on site. So all of a sudden, the videos or whatever, the most shocking things or the most provocative things are what gets the attention. And then they come back to people and they say, hey, well, if you really want your fans to see the stuff, you can just pay to promote your content. And you're like, huh? Because I could have sworn 4 years ago you told me that I could just have a direct relationship with my fans. And now you're saying I can say stuff, but now I have to pay for them to see it. And that's just how it goes, right? And I think every network is like that. And that's what the rise of like WhatsApp groups or Signal channels, I think, or Telegram channels, has been like an example of like, like technology finding a way out or whatever. But I think now like I get more kind of useful content from smaller WhatsApp groups or Signal groups of like founders sharing interesting things where there are no ads and there's not a lot of self-promotion. And and I think that's just so the way like all these networks have gone. Like I would say LinkedIn is perhaps slightly better than Twitter in terms of like what do I see, because like the spammy, sleazy, trashy stuff hasn't made its way onto like LinkedIn. But what is on LinkedIn is like some of the worst forced content marketing thought leadership shit. Like, you're showering wrong. Yesterday I took a shower. My God, it's horrible stuff. Like, but like every now and then there is actually useful content there too.
I agree. It's like, I just got married. This is what I've learned about B2B SaaS. Like,
exactly,
how?
all that shit. Yeah, yeah.
By any measure, you're very, very successful. So Intercom is valued based on deal room at 1.2 billion euros. You've invested in 100 plus companies. What's your relationship with money?
I'd love to correct that Intercom valuation, but I can't. What's my relationship with money? How would I answer that? I think the way like money is not a large cause of happiness in my life, but the presence of money means the removal of a large cause of stress. And money to me is an ability to take stress out of my life, whether that's fear or like, I wish this thing didn't break as often. Well, now I can buy a new one or whatever. Like any sort of form of like chaos or like difficulty in your life, money can take care of a lot of them. And then obviously, as your net worth increases, you can extend that luxury, if you like, to your family or to your friends as well. So I think that's how I think about it more. Like, not to be all Beatles about it, but I don't think the money can buy you love, but I think it can buy you the absence of sorrow in a lot of cases. In not all cases, life is still life. But again, like I think that's probably the single biggest shift as moving from being like a pretty like low paid consultant or early stage founder or whatever, through to like being somebody who actually has access to cash. I think the biggest shift is like kind of realizing that like a lot of things that used to be a lot of cause of a lot of stress in your life can just kind of disappear. As are things that like you woes about finance, bills, loans, etc. All that goes away, and it is like a weight lifts off your life.
And when did the change happen? Like, is it after you fundraised a round, or you did a secondary and you realize it's like, okay, now I think.
For founders, it's usually a secondary somewhere along the line that actually kicks in some sort of meaningful realization of the value of what you've been building in the form of actual euros or dollars in your account, and then you move into like, well, like I think it takes everyone a while to realize like the job for once isn't defend this cash at all costs and put it away somewhere safe. The job is actually use this to like make yourself more able to be a better founder, and that often means like get rid of your mortgage or like whatever it might mean. Like it's different things to different people at different stages in their life. Like depending on which industry you're in, I'm either an old founder or a young founder. But I think it's the job is position yourself such that finance is not a big cause of stress, and that you have the freedom to be the best founder you can be for your company.
And what would be your advice to, let's say, Des from 2011? This is the last question. You meet him 2011. What would you say?
Personal or professional?
Both.
I think the personal would be like get married sooner and start your family sooner. I think I probably just meandered for like we just meandered for maybe 1 to 2 years. That like, if I could do it all again, I think I'd try and work out a way to fast forward. Sometimes you need to do those years to really be sure about what you're doing or to really mature or whatever. But I think if I could do it all again, I'd probably try and accelerate that piece. And then professionally, it's so many different directions and so many different like decisions. Like it's kind of abstract, but like I think founders can be quite over-advised, and there's a lot of like industry best practices that will kind of get force-fed to you foie gras style by the industry, by just viral memes or whatever, by advisors or by third parties or by super senior executive hires that you make or whatever. And you just kind of like, you're tempted because you have a young, hungry, curious mind. You're tempted to try and consume information everywhere you find it without kind of reading the warnings on the sticker, on the packet. And I think realizing that like a lot of advice has a best before date. Like advice expires. Like the way you scaled DocuSign in 2008 has no bearing on how Lovable should grow their business today. But there was definitely a period where like where I felt like the whole of Silicon Valley was just kind of like force feeding themselves regurgitated advice from how former B2B SaaS companies of yesteryear once scaled. And I think I would say from my part, I probably overindulged in that and came up with concluded that a lot of things were true without really stress testing them myself. And as a result, I ended up kind of like, either starting things or doing things or agreeing with things that didn't actually in their core make sense to me, but I read it so many times that it just must be true. So I think if I was to sort of say something professionally, it would just be like back yourself, like, yeah, like you're here for a reason and you should have more. If it feels bad, don't do it, like type of thing. And that could apply for anything from like hiring through to like pricing or everything in between.
Love that. The advice has an expiry date. Thanks very much for taking the time. This was an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you.